Free Fruit for Young Widows by Nathan Englander. When the Egyptian president Nasser took control of the Suez Canal, threatening Western access to that vital route, an agitated France shifted allegiances, joining forces with Britain and Israel against Egypt. This is a fact neither here nor there, except that during the 1956 Sinai campaign, there were soldiers in the Israeli army and soldiers in the Egyptian army who ended up wearing identical French-supplied uniforms to battle. Not long into the fighting, an Israeli platoon came to rest at a captured Egyptian camp in the Sinai Desert. Their Private Shimi Geezer, formerly Shimon Biberblatt of Warsaw, Poland, sat down to eat at a makeshift outdoor mess. 4 armed commandos sat down with him. He grunted, they grunted. Shimi dug into his lunch. A squad mate of Shimi's came over to join them. Professor Tendler, who was then only Private Tendler, not yet a professor, not yet even in possession of a high school degree, placed the tin cup that he was carrying on the edge of the table, taking care not to spill his tea. Then he took up his gun and shot each of the commandos in the head. They fell quite neatly. The first 2, who had been facing Professor Tendler, tipped back off the bench into the sand. The second pair, who had their backs to the professor and were all still staring open-mouthed at their dead friends, fell face down, the sound of their skulls hitting the table somehow more violent than the report of the gun. Shocked by the murder of 4 fellow soldiers, Shimi Geezer tackled his friend. To Professor Tendler, who was much bigger than Shimi, the attack was more startling than threatening. Tendler grabbed hold of Shimi's hands while screaming, "Egyptians! Egyptians!" in Hebrew. He was using the same word about the same people in the same desert that had been used thousands of years before. The main difference, if the old stories are to be believed, was that God no longer raised his own fist in the fight. Professor Tendler quickly managed to contain Shimi in a bear hug. "Egyptian commandos, confused," Tendler said, switching to Yiddish. The enemy joined you for lunch." Shimi listened. Shimi calmed down. Professor Tendler, thinking the matter was settled, let Shimi go. As soon as he did, Shimi swung wildly. He continued attacking because who cared who those 4 men were? They were people. They were human beings who had sat down at the wrong table for lunch. They were dead people who had not had to die. "You could have taken them prisoner," Shimi yelled. "Halt!" he screamed in German. "That's all, halt!" Then with tears streaming and fists flying, Shimi said, "You didn't have to shoot." By then, Professor Tendler had had enough. He proceeded to beat Shimi Geezer. He didn't just defend himself. He didn't subdue his friend. He flipped Shimi over, straddled his body, and pounded it down until it was level with the sand. He beat his friend until his friend couldn't take any more beating, and then he beat him some more. Finally, he climbed off his friend, looked up into the hot sun, pushed through the crowd of soldiers who had assembled in the minutes since the Egyptians sat down to their fate. Tendler went off to have a smoke. For those who had come running at the sound of gunfire to find 5 bodies in the sand, it was the consensus that a pummeled Shimi Geezer looked to be in the worst condition of the bunch. At the fruit and vegetable stand that Shimi Geezer eventually opened in Jerusalem's Mahani Yehuda market, his son, little Edgar, asked about the story of Professor Tendler again and again. From the time he was 6, Edgar had worked the Duchend at his father's side whenever he wasn't in school. At that age, knowing only a child's version of the story, the Tendler had done something in one of the wars that upset Edgar's father, and Edgar's father had jumped on the man, and the man had, his father never hesitated to admit, beat him up very badly. Edgar couldn't understand why his father was so nice to the professor now. Reared as he was on the laws of the small family business, Edgar couldn't grasp why he was forbidden to accept a single lira from Tendler. The professor got his vegetables free. After Edgar weighed the tomatoes and the cucumbers, his father would take up the bag, stick in a nice fat eggplant, unasked, and pass it over to Professor Tendler. "Koch," his father would say, "take it, and wish your wife well." As Edgar turned 9 and 10 and 11, the story began to fill out. He was told about the commandos and the uniforms, about shipping routes in the Suez, and the Americans and the British and the French. He learned about the shots to the head. He learned about all the wars his father had fought in, 73, 67, 56, 48, though Shimi Geezer will still stop short of the one he'd first been swept up in, the war that ran from 1939 to 1945. Edgar's father explained the hazy morality of combat, the split-second decisions, the assessment of threat and response, the nature of percentages and absolutes. Shimi did his best to make clear to his son that Israelis, in their nation of unfinished borders and unwritten constitutions, were trapped in a gray space that was called real life. In this gray space, he explained, even absolutes could maintain more than one position, reflect more than one truth. You too, he said to his son, may someday face a decision such as Professor Tendler's. May you never know from it. Edgar wasn't one for the gray. He was a tiny, thoughtful, buck-toothed boy of certainties. Every Friday when Tendler came to the stand, Edgar would pack up the man's produce and then run through the story again, searching for black and white. The man had saved his father's life, but maybe he hadn't. He'd done what was necessary. Maybe he could have done it another way. And even if the basic schoolyard rule applied in adult life, that a beating delivered earns a beating in return, did it ever justify one as fierce as the beating his father had described? A pummeling so severe that Shimmy, while telling the story, would run Edgar's fingers along his left cheek to show him where Professor Tendler had flattened the bone. Shimmy would send him running across Agrippa Street to bring back 2 cups of coffee or 2 glasses of tea to welcome Professor Tendler, telling Edgar to snatch a good-sized handful of pistachios from Eisenberg's cart along the way. This treatment his father reserved only for his oldest friends. And absolutely no one but the war widows got their produce free. Quietly and with dignity, so as not to cause these women any shame, Edgar's father would send them off with fresh fruit and big bags of vegetables, sometimes for years after their losses. He always took care of the young widows. When they protested, he'd say, "You sacrifice, I sacrifice. All in all, what's a bag of apples?" "It's all for one country," he'd say. When it came to Professor Tendler, so clear an answer never came. When Edgar was 12, his father acknowledged the complexities of Tendler's tale. "Do you want to know why I can care for a man who once beat me? Because to a story there is context. There's always context in life." "That's it?" Edgar asked. "That's it." At 13, he was told a different story because at 13, Edgar was a man. "You know, I was in the war," Shimmy said to his son. The way he said it, Edgar knew he didn't mean 48 or 56, 67 or 73. He did not mean the Jewish wars, in all of which he had fought. He meant the big one, the war that no one in his family but Shimmy had survived, which was also the case of Edgar's mother. This was why they had taken a new name, Shimmy explained. In the whole world, the geezers were 3. "Yes," Edgar said, "I know." "Professor Tendler was also in that war," Shimmy said. "Yes," Edgar said. "It was hard on him," Shimmy said. "That is why I am always nice." Edgar thought. Edgar spoke. "But you were there too? You had the same life as him? You'd never have shot 4 men, even the enemy, if you could have taken them prisoners, if you could have spared a life. Even if you were in danger, you'd risk—" Edgar's father smiled and stopped him. "Quote call," he said. "A similar life is not a same life. There is a difference." Here Shimmy's face turned serious, the lightness gone. "In that first war, in that big war, I was the lucky one," he said. "In the Shoah, I survived." "But he's here," Edgar said. "He survived, just the same as you." "No," Edgar's father said. "He made it through the camps. He walks, he breathes. He was very close to making it out of Europe alive, but they killed him. After the war, we still lost people. They killed what was left of him in the end." For the first time, without Professor Tendler there, without one of Shimmy's friends from the ghetto who stopped by to talk in Yiddish, without one of the soldier buddies from his unit at the reserves, or one of the kibbutzniks from whom he bought his fruit and his vegetables, Edgar's father sent Edgar across Agrippa Street to get 2 glasses of tea, one for Edgar and one for him. "Hurry," Shimmy said, sending Edgar off with a slap on his behind. Before Edgar had taken a step, his father grabbed his collar and popped open the register, handing him a brand-new 10-shekel bill. "And buy us a nice big bag of seeds from Eisenberg. Tell him to keep the change. You and we're going to sit a while." Shimmy took out the second folding chair from behind the register. Also be the first time the father and son had ever sat down in the store together. Another rule of good business: the customer should always find you standing. Always there's something you can be doing: sweeping, stacking, polishing apples. The customer will come to a place where there is pride. That is why Professor Tendler got his tomatoes free. Why the sight of the man who beat Shimmy made his gaze go soft with kindness in the way that it did when one of the miskinot came by. Why I took on what Edgar called his father's free fruit for young widow's face and eyes. This is the story that Shimmy told Edgar when he felt that his boy was a man. The first thing Professor Tendler saw when his death camp was liberated were 2 big, tough American soldiers fainting dead away. The pair, presumably war-hardened, stood before the immense, heretofore unimaginable brutality of modern extermination, frozen, slack-jawed before a mountain of putrid, naked corpses, a hill of men. And from this pile of broken bodies that had been, prior to the American invasion, set to be burned, a rickety skeletal Tendler stared back. Professor Tendler stared and studied. When he was sure that these soldiers were not Nazi soldiers, he crawled out from his hiding place among the corpses, pushing and shoving these balsa wood arms and legs aside. It was this hill of bodies that had protected Tendler day after day. The poor Sonderkommandos who dumped the bodies, as well as those who came to cart them to the ovens, knew that the boy was inside. They brought him the crumbs of their crumbs to keep him going. Though it was certain death for these prisoners to protect him, it allowed them a sliver of humanity to their inhuman jobs. This was what Shimmy was trying to explain to his son. These palest shadows of kindness were enough to keep a dead man alive. When Tendler finally got to his feet, straightening his body out, when the corpse that was Professor Tendler at age 13, your age, came crawling from that nightmare, he looked at the two Yankee soldiers, who looked at him, then hit the ground with a thud. Professor Tendler had already seen so much in life that this was not worth even a pause, so he walked on. He walked on naked through the gates of the camp, walked on until he got some food and some clothes, walked on until he had shoes and then a coat. He walked on until he had a little bread and a potato in his pocket, a surplus. Soon there was also in that pocket a cigarette and then a second, a coin and then a second. Surviving in this way, Tendler walked across borders until he was able to stand straight and tall, until he showed up in his childhood town in a matching suit of clothes, with a few bills in his pocket, and in his waistband a 6-shooter with 5 bullets chambered in order to protect himself during the nights that he slept to the side of the road. Professor Tendler was expecting no surprises, no reunions. He'd seen his mother killed in front of him, his father, his 3 sisters, his grandparents, after some months in the camp, the 2 boys that he knew from back home. But home, that was the thing he held on to. Maybe his house was still there, and his bed. Maybe the cow was still giving milk, and the goat still chewing garbage, his dog still barking at the chickens as before. And maybe his other family, the nurse at whose breast he had become strong before weakened, her husband who had farmed his father's field, and their son, his age, and another, 2 years younger, boys with whom he had played like a brother, maybe this family was still there waiting for him to come home. Tendler could make a new family in that house. He could call every child he might one day have by his dead loved ones' names. The town looked as it had when he'd left. The streets were his streets, linden trees in the square, taller but laid out as before. And when Tendler turned down the dirt road that led to his gate, he fought to keep himself from running. He fought to keep himself from crying, because after what he had seen, he knew that to survive in this world he must always act like a man. So Tendler buttoned his coat and walked quietly toward the fence, wishing that he had a hat to take off as he passed through the gate, just the way the man of the house would when coming home to what was his. When he saw her in the yard, when he saw Fanushka, his nurse, their maid, the tears came anyway. Tendler popped a precious button from his coat as he ran to her and threw himself into her arms, and he cried for the first time since the trains. With her husband at her side, Fanushka said to him, "Welcome home, son, and welcome home, child. And we prayed. We lit candles. We dreamed of your return." When they asked, "Are your parents also coming? And your sister and your grandparents, are they far behind?" When they asked after all the old neighbors, house by house, Tendler answered, not by metaphor and not by insinuation. When he knew the fate, he stated it as it was, beaten or starved, shot, cut in half, front of the head caved in. All this he related without feeling, matters each of fact. All this he shared before venturing a step through his front door. Looking through that open door, Tendler decided he would live with these people as family until he had a family of his own. He would grow old in this house, free to be free. He would gate himself up again. But it would be his gate, his lock, his world. A hand on his hand pulled him from his reverie. It was Fanushka talking, a sad smile on her face. "Time to fatten you up," she said. "A feast for first dinner." And she grabbed the chicken at her feet and twisted its neck right there in the yard. "Come in," she said, while the animal twitched. "The master of the house has returned." "Just as you left it," she said. "Only a few of our things." Tendler stepped inside. It was exactly as he remembered it. The table, the chairs, except that all that was personal was gone. Fanushka's 2 sons came in, and Tendler understood what time had done. These boys, fed and housed, warmed and loved, were fully twice his size. He felt then something he had never known in the camps, a civilized emotion that would have served no use. Tendler felt ashamed. He turned red, clenched his jaw tight, and felt the gums bleeding in his mouth. "You have to understand," Edgar's father said to his son. "These boys, his brothers, they were now twice his size and strangers to him." The boys prodded, shook hands with Tendler. They did not know him any more. "Still, it is a nice story," Edgar said. "Sad, but also happy. He makes it home to a home. It's what you always say, survival. That's what matters. Surviving to start again." Edgar's father held up a sunflower seed, thinking about this. He cracked it between his front teeth. "So, they're all making a dinner for Professor Tendler," he said, "and he is sitting on the kitchen floor, legs crossed, as he did when he was a boy, and he is watching happily, drinking a glass of goat's milk still warm. Then the father goes out to slaughter their goat. 'A feast for dinner,' he says. 'A chicken's not enough.' Professor Tendler, who had not had meat in years, looks at him, and the father, running a nail along his knife, says, 'I remember the kosher way.'" Tendler was so happy that he could not bear it, so happy and so sad. With a cup of warm milk and the warm feeling, Tendler had to pee. But he didn't want to move now that he was there with his other mother and resting on her shoulders a baby sister, a year and a half old and one curl on the head. A little girl, fat and happy, fat in the ankle, fat in the wrist. Professor Tendler rushed out at the last second, out of the warm kitchen, out from under his roof. Professor Tendler, a man whom other men had tried to turn into an animal, did not race to the outhouse. It didn't cross his mind. He stood right under the kitchen window to smell the kitchen smells, to stay close. And he took a piss. Over the sound of the stream he heard his nurse lamenting. He knew what she must be lamenting. The Tendler family destroyed. He listened to what she was saying, and he heard, "He will take everything," is what she said. "He will take it all from us. Our house, our field. He'll snatch it away. Everything we've built and protected. Everything that has been for so long ours." There outside the window, pissing and listening, and also dissociating, as Professor Tendler would call it, though he did not then have the word, he knew only that he was watching himself from above. He could see himself feeling all the disappointment as he felt it, till he was keenly and wildly aware that he had felt nothing at all those years, felt nothing when his father and mother were shot, felt nothing while in the camps, nothing, in fact, from the moment he was driven from his home to the moment he returned. In that instant, Tendler's guilt was sharper than any sensation he had ever known. And here, in response to his precocious son, Shimmy said, Yes, of course it was about survival. Tendler's way of coping. Of course he'd been feeling all along. But Tendler, a boy who had stepped over his mother's body and kept walking, had for those peasants opened up. It was right then, Professor Tendler later told Shimmy, that he became a philosopher. "He will steal it all away," Nushka said. "Everything. He has come for our lives." And her son, whom Tendler had considered a brother, said, "No." And Tendler's other almost brother said, "No." "We will eat," Fanushka said. "We will celebrate. And when he sleeps, we will kill him." To one of the sons, she said, "Go. Tell your father to keep that knife sharp." To the other, she said, "You get to sleep early, and you get up early, and before you grab the first tit on that cow, I want his throat slit. Ours, not to be taken away." Tendler ran, not toward the street, but back toward the outhouse in time to turn around as the kitchen door flew open, in time to smile at the younger brother on his way to find his father, in time for Tendler to be headed back the right way. "Do you want to hear what was shared at such a dinner?" Shimmy asked his son. The memories roused and oaths sworn. "There was wine, I know." Drink, the mother said. There was the chicken and a pot of goat stew. And in a time of great deprivation, there was also sugar for the tea. At this, Shimmy pointed at the bounty of their stand. And as if nothing, next to the baby's basket on the kitchen floor sat a basket of apples. Tendler hadn't had an apple in who knows how long. Tendler brought the basket to the table. The family laughed as he peeled the apples with a knife, first eating the peels, then the flesh, and savoring even the seeds and the cores. It was a celebration, a joyous night. So much so that Professor Tendler could not by its end, belly distended, eyes crossed with drink, believe what he knew to have been said. There were hugs and there were kisses, and Tendler, the master of the house, was given his parents' bedroom upstairs, the two boys across the hall, and below in the kitchen. It would be warmest, slept the mother and the father and the fat-ankled girl. "Sleep well," Fanushka said. "Welcome home, my son." And sweetly she kissed Tendler on both eyes. Tendler climbed the stairs. He took off his suit and went to bed. And that was where he was when Fanushka popped through the door and asked him if he was warm enough, if he needed a lamp by which to read. "No, thank you," he said. "So formal." "No thanks necessary," Fanushka said. "Only yes, mother, or no, mother, my poor reclaimed orphan son." "No light, mother," Tendler said, and Fanushka closed the door. Tendler got out of bed. He put on his suit. Once again, without any shame to his actions, Tendler searched the room for anything of value, robbing his own home. Then he waited. He waited until the house had settled into itself, glass creaks slipping from the floorboards as the walls pushed against the wind. He waited until his mother, his Fanushka, must surely sleep, till a brother intent on staying up for the night, a brother who had never once fought for his life, convinced himself that it would be all right to close his eyes. Tendler waited until he too had to sleep, and that's when he tied the laces of his shoes together and hung them over his shoulder. That's when he took his pillow with one hand, with the other quickly cocked his gun. Then with goose feathers flying, Tendler moved through the house. A bullet for each brother, one for the father, one for the mother. Tendler fired until he found himself standing in the warmth of the kitchen, one bullet left to protect him on the nights when he would sleep by the side of the road. The last bullet Tendler left in the fat baby girl, because he did not know for mercy, did not need to leave another of that family to grow and to kill him at some future time. "He murdered them," Edgar said. "A murderer." "No," his father told him. "There was no such notion at the time." "Even so, it was murder," Edgar said. "If it is, then it's only fair. They killed him first. It was his right." "But you always say context." "But the baby, the girl." "The baby is hardest, I admit. These are questions for the philosopher. These are the theoretical instances put into flesh and blood." "But it's not a question. These people, they are not the ones who murdered his family. They were coming for him that night. He could have escaped, could have run for the gate when he overheard. He didn't need to race back toward the outhouse, race to face the brother as he came the other way. Maybe there was no more running in him. Anyway, do you understand an eye for an eye? Can you imagine a broader meaning of self-defense?" "You always forgive him," Edgar said. "You suffered the same things, but you aren't that way. You would not have done what he did." "It is hard to know what a person would and wouldn't do in any specific instance, and you, spoiled child, apply the rules of civilization to a boy who had seen only its opposite. Maybe the fault for those deaths lies in a system designed for the killing of Tendlers that failed to do its job. An error, a slip that allowed a Tendler, no longer fit, back loose in the world." "Is that what you think?" "It's what I ask. I ask you, my Edgar, what you would have done if you were Tendler that night." "Not kill." "Then you die." "Only the grown-ups." "But it was a boy who was sent to cut Tendler's throat." "How about killing only those who would do harm?" "Still it's murder. Still it is killing people who have not yet to act, murdering them in their sleep." "I guess," Edgar said. "I can see how they deserved it, the four. How I might, if I were him, have killed them." Shimmy shook his head, looking sad. "And whoever are we, my son, to decide who should die?" It was on that day that Edgar Geezer became a philosopher himself, not in the manner of Professor Tendler, who taught theories up at the university on the mountain, but like his father, practical and concrete. Edgar would not finish high school or go to college. Except for his 3 years in the army, he would spend his life happily working at the stand in the shuk. He'd stack the fruit into pyramids and contemplate weighty questions with the seriousness of thought. When there were answers, Edgar would try employing them to make for himself and others, whatever small way, a better life. It was on that day, too, that Edgar decided Professor Tendler was both a murderer and at the same time a Michigan. He believed he understood how and why Professor Tendler had come to kill that peasant family, how men sent to battle in uniform, even in the same uniform, would find no mercy at his hand. Edgar also came to see how Tendler's story could just as easily have ended for the professor that first night, back in the parents' room, in his parents' bed, a gun with 4 bullets held in a suicide's hand, how the first bullet Tendler ever fired might have been into his own head. Still, every Friday, Edgar packed up Tendler's fruit and vegetables. In that bag, Edgar would add, when he had them, a pineapple or a few fat mangoes dripping honey. Handing it to Tendler, Edgar would say, "Gosh, Professor, take it." This, even after his father had died. And the next story is, I guess it would go under the category of creative nonfiction. Okay, but it's a very good story, and I really want to share it. And if you respect and love other animals, keeping in mind that we are animals, as much as I do, I think you'll appreciate this story also. It's called Charging Lions. It's by Chester F. Phillips. Night Corral. "Wake up," Debbie shouted. "I think a lion's got Duchess's calf." I bolted awake, sitting up in bed disoriented. On warm nights, we slept with the windows open, and I heard the shrill bellowing that was Duchess's most distinctive characteristic, just as it was her mother's. When you spend every day for years getting to know any creatures, human or otherwise, you come to know such things, the differences of vocal inflection, calm or skittish or aggressive temperaments, degrees of adventurousness versus maternal instinct, intelligence and guile, the willingness to walk a long way. From the corral, the calls sounded again and again, loud, deranged by worry, a desperate mother's cries of distress, uninvited guests. When they first showed up in the spring of 1998, the raccoons were cute, mother and 3 young ones that discovered the dry cat food I left on the upstairs porch of the single-room second story we used as a bedroom during the cooler months of the year. I put the cat food out for Ramble, a feral cat who'd been hanging around for a while, sitting in a tree near our bedroom window. I decided to adopt him and was gradually winning him over. When the raccoons arrived after dark, they would climb a mesquite tree on the other side of the house, the mother first, followed by a line of 3 adolescents. They would scratch and skitter across the tin roof and climb down onto the upstairs porch to the cat food dish. Debbie and I would hear them on the roof and creep upstairs, crawling slowly across the wood floor till we crouched below the eastern window. Then we peered out at the 4 raccoons as they stood around the cat dishes, picking out single kibbles of food, dipping them into the cat's water bowl before eating. They reminded us of people standing around a tray of chips and dips at a party. Except for the clattering noise they made on the roof at night while we tried to sleep, we didn't object. They kept coming, the visits growing more and more frequent until they were a nightly occurrence. Cows are people, too. The first year we lived in Cascabel, our ranching mentors, Jim and Pat Corbett, had a saying they taught us. 2 middle-class young 20s dropouts from strip mall society who showed up with big dreams and no money to live in a dirt road rural community on the San Pedro River in southern Arizona. Cows are people, too, they said. It was meant to be a little funny, but not a joke. Jim explained to us his belief that many people act autistic when relating to animals, especially to livestock and production agricultural systems, behaving as though there is no other there, no one observing and responding. I'd read Jewish philosopher Martin Buber's I and Thou, found Jim's conceptualization similar but more expansive. Buber believed that healthy relations with the rest of the world come through dialogical engagements. I engages with any other creature as a thou, who acts and reacts dynamically with I, rather than merely being an object. I manipulates according to his will. Any authentic I-thou relationship, according to Buber, is also a portal into a relationship with God, the spirit or force that runs through all beings. Jim extended Buber's language-based philosophy to include all forms of communication, which for humans and cows means mostly body language, subtle angles of approach and gestures learned from watching the cows interact with each other. Jim was not anyone's image of a classic Western cowboy. He had a floppy white canvas hat, solid-colored, sweat-stained shirts, partly unbuttoned and hanging loosely over his jeans and gaunt frame, trimmed gray Man of La Mancha goatee, and black Teva sandals because no other shoes fit his feet. His fingers and toes were like claws, curled over one another by rheumatoid arthritis, a condition that bent and gnarled his body but could not touch his ironwood will. I remember first watching Jim approach cows on the range back when Debbie and I, who had not grown up ranching, still felt cautious about relating to such large and powerful creatures. He would speak softly when he got within hearing distance, made a soft, guttural-sounding greeting, and approached from the side, not head-on, because cows' eyes are on the sides of their heads, and they regard a head-on approach as an aggressive challenge that invites a butting of heads. Jim would approach from the side and raise his hand to the cow's muzzle when he reached her, letting her take in his scent and recognize him. Often the cows stretched out their necks so he could scratch their dewlaps, the sensitive skin below their necks. He moved among them with ease and obvious pleasure, so they were his people and he was theirs. I remember when Jim introduced us to his red and white half-Jersey milk cow, Red, showed us how to milk by hand. He used no milking stall, neither rope nor hobbles on Red's feet to keep her from kicking. He just led us into the pasture, where he had a small pen in which he could put Red to exclude other cows. He gave her a bucket of alfalfa pellets, squatted on the ground with a large stainless steel pot to catch the milk and went to it, his twisted hand stroking Red's teats from the base to the tip, pulling out the milk with pressure applied between his thumb and forefinger, the only way his hands could grasp. He crouched, tilting forward so that his head rested against Red's udder just in front of her hind leg. "She asked to accept you as one of her calves," Jim said without looking up. It was simple and obvious to him. To us, it was revelatory, and Jim was beautiful. Debbie and I quickly came to love Jim for living out the practices that others might have seen as only disembodied words. Cows were people, sentient beings in a sentient world. Even good stewardship was not enough. To Jim, stewardship still implied domination, however benign. In northern Louisiana, I had watched my maternal grandfather work cattle by scaring them into a corral or a trailer. They were no more real beings to him than the tractors he rode, just obstinate, frustrating tools that resisted his will. I observed the same thing when helping to vaccinate a few hundred cattle on a more mainstream ranch in Cascabel in exchange for pregnancy checking lessons. I believe Jim had it right. Much of the nightmare of animal factory farming stems from a systematic refusal to treat animals like feeling, thinking creatures, a refusal essential to the system's continuation. To find sentience in them would make clear what battery cages and jam-packed feedlots really are. Sites of carefully organized mass enslavement. I objected not to ranching itself, not even to the slaughter, but to the process of subjection, the subjection of land, of animals, and of the people who came up from Mexico to work long hours as hirelings, building fences or bullying cattle, not only alienated from the products of their labor, also cut off from membership in the greater community. Jim replaced subjection with what he called land redemption, the symbiotic integration of humans into the desert ecosystem. The cow became both companion and source of nutrition. Desert bunch grasses and forabs could not directly become part of human tissue. Intermediating between us and the desert, cows were alchemists, transmitting grasses and forabs into milk and meat, and the alienated man and woman into participants in a vast communion. Melon thieves. For a few months, the raccoon family seemed happy with cat food. I decided it wasn't a bad trade in exchange for keeping the hens alive. Since Rambo usually left quite a bit of food in his bowl at night, I decreased the amount I put out each morning so that Rambo ate most of it during the day. Only little remained for the raccoons to clean up at night. One night in early summer, they took a chicken anyway. A few weeks later, they took another. Second time, Debbie and I rushed outside when we heard the chicken's death squawk, an eerie, sharp cry that sounds like no other noise chickens make. We got there in time to see two of the younger raccoons, not yet full grown, escaping into the mesquite bosque. One of them clutched a red hen in his mouth. In April, we planted cantaloupes and watermelons in two of our sunken bed gardens. By July, the plants were fruiting. We watched the small melons grow with great anticipation. Cool, sweet melon slices from the refrigerator were a favorite summer snack after hours spent working in the grueling heat. We harvested one cantaloupe too soon, paying for our impatience by eating it even though it wasn't much sweeter than a cucumber. So we waited and let them ripen. One morning, Debbie walked into the kitchen holding a small green watermelon. It was perfect, except that a large hole had been gnawed into it and small ants swarmed in the hole. "Hurry up and look before the ants get all over my hands," Debbie said with a frustrated grimace. "There's another one outside just like it." A few nights later, I spied one of the young raccoons as it slipped into the melon patch. I charged out the door, yelling as the raccoon ran away that it had already ruined another melon. Early lessons in livestock husbandry. Our practice with heifers, young cows that had never delivered a calf, was to corral them so we could check on them throughout the day and night as they got close to calving. It was the way the Cigar Juniper Corporation, the collectively owned ranch and integrative living project that Jim co-founded, approached everything, placing ultimate value on the welfare of the animals and the land, however labor-intensive the methods. Calving problems could occur with any animal, but heifers experienced them by far the most frequently. We learned this the hard way. In 1997, during our first year tending cattle, we lost the first calf we delivered. Had one front leg curled under it, and we couldn't get the other one out before the calf suffocated in the birth canal. Following Jim's instructions, after a short, urgent phone call, I stuck my hand inside the heifer to try to unfold the leg. I could not. The following year, the mother, named Hannah for the dark red highlights in her mostly black hair, came up infertile. She would come into heat, be bred, and then come into heat again several weeks later. Vibriosis, an infectious bacterial disease that causes spontaneous abortion and infertility, was the likeliest cause. but I always wondered whether I'd done something wrong or whether the calf's twisted body itself injured something inside her. She was one of the first 3 animals we bought from Jim and Patty and raised to maturity. She was gentle and trusting, and loaded easily into the trailer to be taken to slaughter. Naked in the Numinous World 1. When Duchess started bawling, it was 2 a.m. on a hot, humid night in late August 2000. The cries came from the barbed wire corral 20 yards from our back door. Duchess was there because she'd had her first calf a few days earlier. Mother Paul, our oldest cow, was in the corral to keep Duchess company. The fact that Mother Paul had also sounded the alarm woke up Debbie and assured her that the threat was immediate and very real. When she woke me, Debbie had already been outside. She stood over me, holding a flashlight and urging me to hurry. I slept in only a t-shirt and started grasping around for the jeans I'd taken off earlier. "There's no time for that. The lion's got the calf now," Debbie said. I stopped looking for my jeans and put on the sandals I kept by the bed in case of an emergency. "How do you know?" Something was thrashing around in the graythorn outside the corral. What else could it be? My sandals were buckled and we raced outside. Debbie pointed the flashlight beam toward a clump of graythorn in the mesquite bosque on the south side of the corral. Nothing moved. We walked quickly but cautiously toward the spot where Debbie thought she'd seen something. Nothing again. It was dark. A night with little moonlight, and a quick search of the area around the graythorn clump revealed no clues. There was no calf, no blood, no lion. Duchess and Mother Paul stood bawling and staring out into the black mesquite woodland. Duchess' calf was gone. Perhaps I should have gone inside then to throw on more clothes and grab the shotgun. Instead, we kept looking, hiring a hitman. I don't like to eat anyone I haven't known," Jim would say with a grin when asked to summarize his views on meat eating. From our long conversations, I knew the age-old pastoralist dilemma still troubled him, as it troubled me and Debbie. How do you kill and eat creatures you've raised and cared for? I'd heard this story about Jim and Pat deciding to put down the long-time S.J. herd bull. Chris had been in the herd for 8 to 9 years. As he'd aged, he'd grown unpredictable, hard to find and move on the range without endangering the herders, not always staying close enough to the cows to detect their heats and keep them bred. He'd been brought to Jim and Paul's pasture for the solemn occasion. Jim wanted to do the killing himself and then participate in the butchering. Chris lowered his huge black head into a black rubber bucket full of alfalfa pellets. As he ate, Jim stood 20 feet away, steeled himself, and raised his .22 rifle, the only gun he and Pat owned. Jim took careful aim at the point on the head where one shot is supposed to drop even a bull. If you drew a line from each eye to the opposite ear, the 2 lines would intersect at that spot. Jim fired. His aim was close. The bullet struck Chris's thick skull only hard enough to sting and draw blood. Chris stamped and shook his head back and forth as if bitten by a horsefly. Then he dipped his head again and continued eating. Jim stood there visibly shaken. After a long moment, he turned and asked Charlie Thomas, an S.J. member and Vietnam vet turned pacifist, to drive several miles back to his house and bring back a high-powered rifle. Jim and a small group of people who'd come to help with the slaughter stood around, shocked and waiting, till Charlie returned. When the killing was done, Jim, Charlie, and the others labored the rest of the day to skin and disembowel the carcass, divided it into manageable pieces and wrapped them in freezer paper. This is one of the stories that deepened my admiration for Jim even further. He did not waver from his principles, however painful they were to carry out. I viewed Chris's slaughter as a bloody but profound ceremony of responsibility and thanksgiving. Cigarro Juniper rejected entirely the agribusiness model of farming and ranching as an extra-active industry, with cows as little bioreactors concentrating range plants into protein and protein into concentrated wealth. I admired Jim's refusal to become calloused about slaughter. It wasn't supposed to be easy. He called buying meat from the store hiring a hitman. To see by flashlight darkly. While Debbie and I searched the outer perimeter of the corral in widening circles, the night erupted again in bellows and dust. The rest of the cattle responded to Duchess's distress cries by charging in from parts unknown, snorting and calling, while the calves kicked up their heels in excitement. For 10 minutes or so, there was no point in looking further. We could hear nothing but cow sounds, and their commotion raked a thick cloud of dust that hung between the mesquite trees, further limiting visibility. "Any line that was here is probably long gone," I said, discouraged. "Yeah, but where's the calf?" Debbie answered. "Did the line really drag it that fast?" We stood watching as the cattle milled around the corral for a while and then began trickling back down a cattle trail that wound through a few hundred acres of bosque to the south. where they were eating the new fallen mesquite bean crop. "Nothing to see here," I said as they headed out. But Duchess, panicked and distraught, kept pacing the edge of the corral, calling for her calf. Maybe 20 minutes had elapsed since we'd left the house. After the herd left camp, the night's quiet was punctuated only by Duchess, her calls less frequent now as they got no answer. And then they did. From somewhere far out in the mesquite came a bleating sound, the calf answering its mother. Once, twice, then no more. I grabbed the flashlight from Debbie's hand and took off running, still naked except for my sandals and maroon t-shirt. Living a latter-day homesteader's life in Casabel, I often contemplated the dilemma of being what deep ecologist and philosopher Paul Shepard called the tender carnivore, one who both cares for and preys upon domestic animals. In addition to taking solace in Jim's philosophy of symbiosis, I sometimes took Barry Lopez's book Arctic Dreams from the shelf to find solace in this passage. No culture has yet solved the dilemma each has faced with the growth of a conscious mind: how to live a moral and compassionate existence when one is fully aware of the blood, the horror inherent in all life. When one finds darkness not only in one's own culture, but within oneself. There are simply no answers to some of the great pressing questions. You continue to live them out, making your life a worthy expression of a leaning into the light. Worthy or not, I was often given opportunities to confront the paradoxes inherent in my relationship with animals. I leaned into and out of the light, my questioning mind dappled by the contradictions of trying to live on and take sustenance from the desert. Debbie and I lived as both guardians and executioners, sometimes on the same day. Naked in the numinous world, too. Given the thickness of the thorn scrub understory beneath the mesquites, my run soon slowed to a creep, with intermittent pauses to listen for the calf. Debbie had stayed behind. I'm not sure how far away from her I was, but I could not see her. After a few minutes of walking and stopping, I heard it again. A muffled wasn't far away. I quickened my pace, moving toward the sound. Moments later, I came around a gray thorn bush, and my flashlight's beams caught the lion full in the face, his eyes glowing gold in the light. I was far too close. The lion stood no more than 30 feet away, facing me, held its head closer to the ground than its shoulders, crouching over its prey. Just beneath the lion's head lay the calf, its throat almost touching the lion's lower jaw. My adrenaline surged with the fear in my throat. Too close, too close. The thought kept ringing in my head. From the Colorado Department of Natural Resources Divisions of Wildlife website. When you walk or hike in mountain lion country, go in groups and make plenty of noise to reduce your chances of surprising a lion. A sturdy walking stick is a good idea. It can be used to ward off a lion. Do not approach a lion, especially when it is feeding or with kittens. Most mountain lions will try to avoid a confrontation. Stay calm when you come upon a lion. Talk calmly yet firmly to it. Move slowly. Stop or back away slowly if you can do it safely. Running may stimulate a lion's instinct to chase and attack. Face the lion and stand upright. Do all you can to appear larger. Raise your arms. Open your jacket if you're wearing one. I'd read most of this before, but I had no shotgun or even a walking stick this time. Not only was I not wearing a jacket, I wasn't wearing pants or boxers. I'd assumed that the lion was already far away, scared off by us and the arriving herd. I'd already both surprised and approached a feeding lion. In fact, I was blatantly challenging it for its prey. I knew well that my mistake might be fatal. I didn't have time to contemplate being such a moron. I had to act. I started screaming, my voice growing louder and louder. Visceral, terrified, furious screaming. I flailed my arms at the gray thorn and mesquite branches near me, tearing off small mesquite branches and flinging them at the lion, the thorns leaving scratches up and down my arms, though I didn't feel them. I stamped my feet on the ground, my body surging with a flood of adrenaline and fear of imminent death. From a couple of hundred yards away, maybe less, Debbie heard what she described as my blood-curdling screams. She knew there was only one possible cause. She started running. My eyes never left the lion, and at first the lion remained still with its eyes on me. I don't know how long it was, maybe not more than a minute. The lion crouched there, sizing me up. A moment of pure encounter between two predators, only one of them capable of killing the other. A reversal of my accustomed role. "Go!" I screamed, the only word I said amidst mostly wordless screaming. The lion did not move, and then it did. It pivoted and moved, rippling 30 feet across the clearing as if molten platinum flowed beneath its skin. I thought it was leaving. Maybe it was. And some other thought, possibly lethal, crossed the lion's mind. It turned and faced me again. I knew what that meant. I charged. My approach lasted maybe 20 seconds or less. and charging may not really be the best description. I stepped toward the lion, not fast but slow and steady, raising my knees high and pounding my legs to the ground, my arms raised above my head, my panicked heart thundering my rib cage. And like a phantom, the lion turned and slid, faster than any flashlight could track him, back into the hanging darkness, flicker of tail and then gone. I stood gasping, staring into the blackness where the lion had vanished. I heard Debbie calling out and gathering my wits enough to answer. Debbie reached me seconds later. "Oh my God," she said, "you're all right." "The lion was right here," I said. "I figured that out. I thought it had you." "Almost did," I said. A few seconds passed, but I didn't say more, still struggling to recover my equilibrium. "Is the calf dead?" "Don't know. Probably." We walked over to the prostrate calf. Debbie took the light from my hand and knelt beside it, scanning the flashlight beam up and down its body. The calf had not been disemboweled or bitten at all. There were teeth marks in its neck, but they hadn't gone deep. Its breath came so shallow that Debbie had to put her hand over the calf's nose to tell if it was breathing at all. "He's alive," she said. I knelt too and placed my own hand where Debbie's had been, in wonder, just to make sure. After a long moment, we rose to our feet, me with the calf in my arms, both of us in shock. I carried it back to the corral with Debbie leading the way by flashlight. It did not squirm. I wondered whether it might have received some less perceptible mortal wound. In the morning, the calf's throat was swollen, so we gave it a shot of penicillin against infection. For months, you could look close and see a few small scars where the lion's teeth had marked it. 18 months later, the calf I'd saved from a lion went to slaughter. We shared the meat with our friends. Learning how to die. If you move into a very wild area, as we did, and you put chickens and calves where they weren't before, you usually get a short grace period before the predators arrive. And at some point, you get on the food map, and they just keep coming. One half-dark morning, I saw a coyote snap a white hen right out of the air as she fluttered up toward a fence rail, trying to escape. We learned how much raccoons like chicken by losing a few, so we reinforced the bottoms of the pens with an extra layer of chicken wire. Daily chores included refilling any small holes that ambitious coyotes dug into the soil around the pens and restapling chicken wire to posts where nimble raccoon hands had tugged it loose. Usually the little forays were unsuccessful. Occasionally a chicken got snatched, and the attacks became more frequent for a while. They decreased again if we did a good job with fortifications. From time to time, Debbie and I would discuss how the raccoons and coyotes were after the same thing we were, so that we couldn't really blame them for trying. I didn't blame the lion for its sharp reminder that most of the world remains beyond our corrals. Even our most intentional relationships exist within vast open systems that cannot be entirely predicted or controlled. In those moments, when the lion and I stood facing each other, with the calf between us, I felt the animal vulnerability and primal terror of being torn open and apart, of being consumed. The fear pulsing through my body was the kind that complicates the idea of communion through eating. I survived, or at least saved the calf, by bluffing, by pretending to be a creature with physical powers I did not possess. My last adaptive card laid on the table. Had the lion leaped toward me and my struggle been futile, I hoped there would have come a moment of acquiescence when I, like the calf, no longer resisted, acknowledging an unforeseen twist in the cosmos, dualities collapsing. I becoming thou, self, other, our bodies the truest offerings we have to make. With the raccoons, I failed my own principles. Let myself blame them for taking more than I wanted them to have, though they could not have understood my limits. To keep the raccoons from eating our melons, we tried covering the plants with sheets weighted down with rocks. The raccoons got under them. Though the yard was already fenced and the chain link kept deer out of the garden, we began to consider whether we needed to set up internal electric fencing around the melon beds, an unsightly and expensive proposition. Then they took another chicken. It became clear that the four of them had come to regard our yard as one-stop shopping, a raccoon quick mart. We got angry at them every day. There was one intact watermelon left in the bed. I made a decision to try something more drastic. "As long as you do it," Debbie said. I could tell she didn't like it from the way she looked at me and pressed her lips together. "What else are we supposed to do?" "I don't know. I think I'd rather just not grow melons." I said nothing. This was not an answer I was willing to hear. When two of the young raccoons reached the yard 2 nights later, I burst through the back door and chased them around the house and across the driveway. One of them leaped onto the fence, topped it, dropped to the other side, and kept going. The other one climbed a mesquite tree in front of the tax shed by the gate. It sat on a branch, peering down at me. I raised the shotgun, loaded with buckshot, and intending to kill. I stood looking along the barrel at the young raccoon for a very long moment. Some part of me knew what was coming. I'd been the boy who asked for a BB gun because his friends had them, only to give weepy burials to a few feathered victims before putting the gun away. When I fired, the raccoon dropped from a low mesquite branch onto the ground and crawled toward the fence, making it 10 or 12 feet before going still. I walked toward it. Blood poured out of its head, its entire lower jaw blown off by the exploding shell. I stood over it as it died, feeling cold, sick, and helpless. I recalled watching them play and eat on the upstairs porch. They got used to us watching through the window pretty fast. We made no quick movements. They went about their business undisturbed. It was the work and care that gave us the first rights to the fruit of our labors, I told myself, wondering all along if there was any such right to be had. I never told Jim and Pat about the raccoon. In Cascabel, I killed and ate rattlesnakes that took up residence in a corral near my doorstep. I shot at a trespassing lion-hunting hound with no second thought, preferring the lion in its place to the dogs out of bounds. I slaughtered chickens. I shot cows I loved that were suffering and could not be cured. If I'd had a gun, I would have fired at the lion as well. The image of the young raccoon falling from the tree, its last heaving strides toward impossible freedom, has never left me. And the writer of this piece is named Chester Phillips. It says, Chester F. Phillips has worked as a rancher, fire lookout, delivery driver, Montessori assistant teacher, rainwater harvester, research assistant, environmental conflict resolution intern, and freshman English instructor, among other things. He received his MFA in nonfiction from the University of Arizona in 2009 and is currently working on a PhD in arid lands resource sciences. And I believe we have time for another He's a Stud, She's a Slut, and 49 other double standards every woman should know. This is number 44. He's protected, she's property. Whether they're about abortion, rape, or something more innocuous like vibrators, there are rulings, laws, and legislation still around that embodies double standards and hypocrisy. These are just a few. Rape. One would hope that the days of blaming the victim and equivocating about what constitutes rape are long gone. But even now, 30 years after feminists fought to bring national attention to the rape epidemic, women are still faced with ridiculous qualifiers when it comes to proving sexual assault. In 2006, a Maryland appellate court ruled that once a woman consents to sex, she can't change her mind. Not if it hurts, not if the partner has become violent, not if she simply wants to stop. You may be scratching your head right now. After all, who would continue to have sex with an unwilling partner besides a rapist? It doesn't take a genius to know that no always means no, no matter when it's said. But it seems that reason and rationality have no place in Maryland. Or take the 19-year-old Howard University student who, after being drugged and sodomized, was denied treatment at local hospitals because she appeared intoxicated. Not so surprising, given the nature of her attack. Even when the teen went to the police for help, she was outright dismissed. Sergeant Ronald Reed at the MPD Sex Assault Unit has been quoted as saying, "If we don't have reason to believe a crime happened, we wouldn't administer a rape kit. Apparently, intoxicated women can't be assaulted." One of my favorites. A judge in Nebraska banned the word rape at a rape trial. The victim couldn't even say assault. The only word she was allowed to say at the trial of the alleged attacker, sex. The judge argued that using the word rape would be too prejudicial. Shockingly, at robbery trials, no one is banned from using the word mugging. Thankfully, the victim was having none of it. I refuse to call it sex or any other word that I'm supposed to say, encouraged to say on the stand, because to me that's committing perjury. What happened to me was rape. It was not sex. Another woman in Massachusetts was told she wasn't really raped. She was defrauded. She went to bed one night in the bedroom she shared with her boyfriend when a guy she thought was her boyfriend got into her bed and had sex with her. Turns out it was her boyfriend's brother pretending to be her lover. Somehow, that's not rape. The court said that Massachusetts law defines rape as intercourse by force and against the will of the victim, and that fraudulently obtaining consent to sexual intercourse does not constitute rape as defined in our statute. Did you know that if you are raped while you are sedated, you don't need to know? A ruling in Oregon came down saying that rape victims who are unaware they were raped shouldn't be informed. The case comes from the trial of a doctor who assaulted women when they were out of it right before surgery. Pay. There's plenty of discrimination when it comes to pay equity, but I had to mention this one because it was a Supreme Court decision. The court's ruling in Ledbetter versus Goodyear says that employees must make their discrimination complaints within 180 days after the alleged unlawful employment practice occurred. So if a woman doesn't realize that she's being paid less than her male coworkers within 180 days, too bad. Fun. Vibrators are still illegal to buy and sell in 8 states. Well, these seem like they would be old laws. Just last year, an Alabama court upheld the ban on vibrators, saying the law wasn't unconstitutional because selling sex toys is like prostitution with yourself. Life. A town in Missouri bans people from living together who aren't related by blood, marriage, or adoption. So no cohabiting for you, sinners. The law received attention after a couple was denied an occupancy permit in the town because the woman's partner wasn't the father of one of her 3 children. Charming. Violence. An Ohio man who beat up his girlfriend had his conviction voided because he wasn't married to her. The ruling said that domestic violence can happen only within marriages. So if the girlfriend wanted to press charges, she'd have to marry her abuser. Now, I could go on and on. There are laws on the books and rulings out there that you wouldn't believe. I really just wanted to bring up to highlight how screwed up things still are on so many levels, how much work we still have to do. So what to do? I don't know, dude. Move. And that's about all the time we have. You're listening to WRBH 88.3 FM. Tune in next time. This is Margie Collis. Good night.